He was just a farmer's son. Quiet, humble, invisible. Until one morning, he was dragged out of school in front of everyone, humiliated for the life he didn't choose. But the very next day, a billionaire's helicopter landed on the school lawn. And what happened next silenced the entire town. Who was Jason really? And why did power show up for someone like him? Jason Carter was no stranger to hard work. By the time most kids his age were still asleep, Jason had already been up for hours, helping his father feed the livestock, mend fences, and clear the barn. Dirt under his nails, sun on his back. This was his world. His family owned a modest farm on the edge of town, just far enough away from the suburbs to feel forgotten. But what Jason couldn't leave behind at the farm gate was the way people saw him. At Crestwood High, Jason's boots were always too muddy, his hands too rough, his jeans too faded. The other students noticed, and they never let him forget it. "Hey, farmer boy," one of them sneered as Jason walked through the hallway one morning. "Got lost on your way to cow school?" Laughter followed. Jason lowered his head and kept walking. He had learned long ago that fighting back only fed their fire. It wasn't just the students. Some teachers too looked down on him, not overtly, but with little sighs when he raised his hand, or with smug corrections when he got a question wrong. To them, Jason was just another country kid with calloused palms and a quiet mouth. Still, Jason endured. His father had always said, "You don't need to shout to be strong." So Jason kept his head down, did his work, and dreamed of one day studying agricultural engineering to help improve small farms like his family's. But all that changed on a rainy Thursday afternoon. He had been called to the principal's office, again. He expected another lecture about being late, though his tardiness was never without reason. That morning, one of their cows had gone into labor unexpectedly, and Jason had stayed to help. Life on a farm didn't come with alarms and schedules. Nature had her own way. Principal Barnes didn't even look up when Jason entered. "We've had complaints again," he said coldly. "You were late to first period, and your appearance is, frankly, inappropriate. You track mud into the building. You wear clothing that doesn't meet our dress standards." Jason stood silently. "This is the third time this month," Barnes continued. "I'm afraid we have no choice. You're being expelled, effective immediately." The words hit harder than any shove in the hallway. "Expelled?" Jason's voice finally broke through, a mix of shock and disbelief. "For helping my family?" Barnes didn't blink. "You're not a good fit here, Jason. Maybe it's time you found somewhere that understands your kind of life. No hearings. No appeals. Just silence." As Jason walked through the front doors of Crestwood High for the last time, his classmates watched from the windows. Some smirked. A few whispered. One even recorded it on his phone. He had never felt so humiliated. But what none of them knew, what not even Jason could have guessed, was that everything was about to change. Not because of an apology. Not because the school would come to its senses. But because, somewhere far away, someone had heard Jason's story and wasn't going to stay silent. The next morning, Jason woke up with a knot in his stomach. He had been expelled the day before, just because of a pair of muddy boots. And now, the entire town was buzzing about it. When he stepped through the school gates, he could feel every eye on him. Some students threw smirks his way, others looked away as if embarrassed for him. At the end of the hallway, a group of kids mocked the principal's words in exaggerated voices. "This ain't a barn, kid. If you walk in with mud, you stay out." Jason clenched his fists but said nothing. He forced himself to swallow the shame and the anger, walking stiffly toward his classroom. But it wasn't any better in there. Someone had taped a note to his desk that read, "Future Farmer," in bold marker. No one stood up for him. Even the teachers looked away. By lunchtime, Jason had had enough. He slipped behind the old bleachers at the back of the school, sitting alone on the cold concrete. Thoughts swirled in his head. Who am I really? When did I become invisible to everyone? His eyes drifted toward the distant cornfields, where his dad worked sunup to sundown with cracked hands and a silent strength. He thought about his mom's tired smile at the dinner table. They had never had much, but they had always had pride. And now, that pride had been stomped on like mud on a hallway floor. That evening, Jason barely spoke. While helping his father mend a broken fence post on the edge of the property, he stayed quiet. His dad watched him closely and finally broke the silence. "Rough day?" he asked. Jason gave a small nod. "They think I'm nobody, Dad." His father set down the toolbox and looked him in the eye. "Then show them who you really are." The next morning, Jason didn't take the school bus. Instead, he ironed his only dress shirt in his father's old workshop, wiped the dust off his boots, and packed the lunch his mom made with extra care. But the real surprise was waiting outside. A helicopter. It landed gently in the pasture, kicking up the early morning mist. Out stepped a tall man in a suit, one of Jason's father's oldest friends. Years ago, this man had owed his start to Jason's family when they gave him work and shelter. Now, he was a billionaire tech investor. He had heard everything. And today, he was showing up, not just to repay a favor, but to walk Jason into school. With the entire town watching. As the helicopter blades slowed and the wind settled, silence swept over the school courtyard. No one moved. No one spoke. Teachers, students, even the principal stood frozen, eyes locked on the sleek, black aircraft and the man stepping out of it. Jason stood at the entrance, unsure whether to stay or walk away. His clothes were still dusty from working the fields that morning. But in that moment, every whisper, every insult, every humiliation he had endured seemed to vanish. The man approaching him wore a sharp gray suit, but it was his presence that stole everyone's attention. Calm, powerful, and unmistakably important. He stopped in front of Jason, placed a firm hand on his shoulder, and said, "You didn't deserve what happened yesterday. And the world deserves to know who you really are." The principal's face turned pale. He recognized the man. Elliot Granger, one of the most influential entrepreneurs in the country. His face had graced magazine covers. His speeches quoted in business schools across the world. No one knew he even had any connection to this dusty rural town. But he did. Because Jason's father, once a young man with dreams bigger than his fields, had saved Granger's life in a storm decades ago. And Granger had never forgotten. "I've been watching you," Granger continued. "Not because of pity. Because of potential. What I saw yesterday was a young man who stood tall while others tried to bury him. That kind of strength? It doesn't go unnoticed." He turned to the crowd. This young man was thrown out of this school not because he lacked intelligence, but because someone decided he didn't look the part. That ends today. Murmurs spread like wildfire. Phones were recording. The story was writing itself. Granger faced the principal. "This boy stays. Not just stays. He gets a full scholarship. And I'm funding a program to ensure no other child in this district is judged by the dirt on their boots." The students stared, stunned. The teachers shifted uncomfortably. And Jason? He was still trying to process what just happened. "But why me?" he asked quietly. Granger smiled. "Because every great journey starts with someone who dared to believe in a kid no one else would." That day, Jason wasn't just reinstated. He was transformed. The days that followed were a whirlwind. Local news stations arrived. Then national ones. Jason's story became a symbol of resilience, of standing tall when the world tries to push you down. More than that, it became a spark. Other students began speaking out. Other schools re-evaluated their treatment of students from struggling families. Granger's program expanded beyond the district, reaching neighboring counties, then entire states. But Jason stayed the same. He still helped his father before school. Still fed the animals at dawn. Still wiped the mud off his boots before entering the classroom. But inside, something had shifted. The boy who once questioned if he belonged now carried himself like he did. Years later, Jason stood at a different podium. This time, delivering a commencement speech at the very school that once expelled him. His voice was steady. His gaze proud. "I used to think success was for kids with the right clothes, the right name, the right address. But I've learned that it's not what's on your resume that matters most. It's what's in your heart when no one believes in you." The crowd stood in thunderous applause. Teachers cried. Students cheered. And in the front row, Elliot Granger sat quietly, smiling like a proud father. Because he hadn't just given a boy a second chance. He had reminded the world that greatness often wears dusty boots and carries silent dreams. If this story moved you, reminded you of the power of quiet strength and unseen courage, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that celebrate the underestimated and the unbreakable. Share your thoughts in the comments. You never know. Your voice might be the next spark of change.